again. And to give us the plenary address, she's currently the director of the Cebuano Study Center of the University of San Carlos, and she's currently also serving as the Central Visayas Coordinator for the National Committee on Literary Arts. At the same time, she has earned her doctorate degree in comparative literature from the University of the Philippines in Diliman and Master of Arts in English from the University of Calgary in Canada. Please help me welcome Dr. Hope Subanpanyu. A round of applause.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I know the sun isn't out, but we have the sun here inside. With your presence here, it's bright enough for all of us. I am happy to be here with you, and I feel honored to be here with you because we belong to the humanities, and we are, art advocates for literature and the humanities. It's very important to have this get together to train ourselves in Cebuano literature, and as I speak, you will know why. So I should begin with a brief historical overview and what I call a clarification of terms. So the humanities as a major discipline or degree program is actually descended from the liberal arts that we have embraced from the West, from the Greek and Latin literatures and other classical disciplines. So the liberal arts comprise in particular philology, poetics, drama, rhetoric, logic, and dialectic. So what does this have to do with us? Philology is commonly now understood as linguistics, and originally it meant the study of literature and of disciplines relevant to literature and language. So we come here because I would like to pull out something from the Greek practice. In ancient Greek, the liberal arts, or where we belong, is an essential part of citizenship in the polis, or what we call the city-state. And the citizen was called polites, which means polite. You know what polite is, right? It means cultured or refined. But the Greek word for anyone who is indifferent to the affairs of the city-state was called, you know, idiotes, or what you know in English as an idiot. Okay. So language is the medium of instruction as the sole means of instrument for the practice of the liberal arts of reading, thinking, writing, and speaking is the heart of any program in the humanities. In fact, for all branches of learning, these liberating arts are the sine qua non. So without them, no education can take place. From the Latin educere, which means to lead forth, to life. So I start with this because as educators, this is part of our role, is to serve as the light. So I will use Cebuano as an exemplary of all other languages, and I think language as a medium for communication and expression. For the artist, because at heart we are all artists as well, the medium for the artist is the muse. For the painter, it is line and color. For the writer, it is language. For the sculptor, it is marble or wood or metal. For the music composer, it is sound. And language is the human being's finest invention. So it is an offspring of the imagination, and hence, I will borrow from Albert Camus, the French writer, when the imagination sleeps, words are emptied of their meaning. By language, I also have in mind not only a given historical language like Filipino or Cebuano, but also mathematical language of science with its numbers and figures, symbols, and graphs. These are all language. even our text. So in the Philippines, English and Filipino are the official languages, as our Constitution provides. But we know for a fact that Cebuano is the largest spoken language in the entire country. They are evolving and assimilative of other languages, regional or foreign. But we also know how strong English is as an international language. And so our literature in Cebuano is comprised of those written in Cebuano and also in English, because we have learned to inhabit the English language. In our literature, in and from English shows that we have colonized that language. To colonize means, as I said, to inhabit. So thus I would stress any people's literature isn't given by or written in any language, but rather wrought, made, forged from it. So forged in its triple sense is to make, to fabricate, and to bring into being, to represent, find, or simulate, and to forge ahead, advance, to transcend. That is to overcome and override the intrinsic inadequacies of any language to translate any reality perceived or intuited. So that's why we have the Cebuano English, we have the Taglish, and all of that. We know that our spoken English is not like the Native American or the Native British spoken English. It is our English. And that overcoming is the writer's agon, the Greek word for struggle, contest. The writer will wrestle with his medium, which is language, which is also his muse, and wrest from it the prize, the literary work, which is both a work of language and a work of the imagination. And we will be dealing with this in our classrooms. Work is the key word. For the writer tills his language, cultivates his language, even as the farmer works the soil to produce his crop. But how override those inadequacies of language except by the language's own evocative resources, such as imagery, metaphor, or what a favorite writer of mine, John Hollander calls the twistings and turnings of a sense of reference when the medium has been mastered. Okay. So although language is an abstract system where the words only read one another and echo their provenance or etymology, it is yet only language that makes real to the mind what mind has perceived and intuited. So incidentally, I would also caution you to avoid referring to our regional languages, Tagalog, Cebuano, Ilocano. Not use the vernacular. Do not use the term vernacular. Because vernacular comes from the Latin vernacula, which means a slave born and raised in his master's house. So that is the meaning of your vernacular. So the word dialect too is allied to the word dialectic, which means conversation or dialogue. But these are just, the fine prints. So it is better to use the local language instead of vernacular. What then, to repeat, is our concern, our central concern with the humanities? The short answer is critical understanding, because through all the different courses in the senior high, even in the elementary and the undergraduate education, and even at the postgraduate level, the basic subject matter, the main subject matter, and it matters, is the practice, the habit of mind of the liberating arts. This is the most important thing that we should not forget. Over and above, it is the practice or the habit of mind That is the arts of reading, thinking, writing, and speaking. I would add to the liberating art or the skill of thinking, the art of observing and imagining, and to the art of speaking, the art of listening. We also need to listen to what's happening. We need to listen to our students. We need to listen to the needs of our community. No matter what our theories about language and literature and the art or craft of writing, no matter what our ideological advocacies, what we do at the very heart of the humanities, indeed, at the very heart of the teaching profession, is the practice of those liberating arts in, by language that we have learned to master and teach from. That is our first challenge, the mastery of the linguistic medium. Here I talk about Cebuano, but also be that of English, of Filipino, and such mastery requires cultivation of the sense of language, which is the basic poetic sense. That is our most intimate sense of what we call our reality or our world. And that's why I want to bring you into that circle, because this is our world. Okay, our words are our only life. The care for words is the care of life. As I said earlier, we live the way. We are the life. So, freeing ourselves through critical understanding is the central experience in the practice of the liberating arts. And that practice is, quote, our center that deserves our loving service, and that can provide, when we appeal to it, a test of all that we do. Can anyone claim that we have no rationale for what we do, when the hunger for critical understanding is so seldom aroused and satisfied in our world? That is not mine, that is John Lewis. I just want to digress briefly on this anecdote. I grew up on foreign literature, although I was born and raised in Cebu. I started with Aesop's Fables and 1001 Arabian Nights, and progressed very quickly to learn the literatures of other countries, Hans Christian Andersen and all that. And it was only in the undergrad that I basically encountered very closely Cebuano literature. And not even that closely. And fast forward to the future, I realized wherever I went, I studied abroad. And on the flights that I would have, I would meet all these different foreigners and say, hi, hello, where are you from, what are you doing? And the conversation would always go to, what do you do? So I teach literature. Who is your favorite writer, they would ask me. And guess who I would answer? Or maybe you would answer, I don't know if it would resonate with you. I would answer like, oh, I love Shakespeare. Because I could quote Shakespeare by heart. I could talk about all his plays, and I had a long list of all these foreign writers. And then, one by one, some questions would come like, who is the most important Philippine writer? And of course, I would say Jose Rizal. And after that, you know, I would be at a loss. I know all these names, but I could not talk about them in depth because I didn't really know what they wrote. Or some wrote short stories, but I would forget the names and all of that. And they would smile at me and be glad, like, wow, you know so much. The Philippines is such an advanced country. But over the years, when my own literature failed me, I was so embarrassed and ashamed. Because I realized that what they wanted to know was about Philippine literature, was about my literature, and I could not say anything. And so, I did a complete turnaround, and when I had these conversations with writers or with these foreigners, I would say, oh, you should read Eftionil Jose. You should read Martin Abellana. And then I started going back to all these women writers that I have done research on. We have writers like this, comparable to your writers like that. And I felt that finally I was able to claim my place. I was no longer a copycat. I was no longer a promoter of foreign literature. I was a promoter of my own literature. And from then, I started translating literatures of the Philippines, Cebuano literature to English, so that I could give it out to them and say, hey, read us. We have all this beautiful, wonderful literature. That's the short of it. Okay, so my sense of identity became stronger because I realized that the rest of the world is just waiting for you to open the door and say, we have this writer, or talk to me about this writer. What's your culture like? There was even another, another example when I went to Cornell and I had a colleague who was studying mourning as in magsubok. And you know, when you mourn for someone you have lost. And I said, you know, we don't have that concept, that Western concept of mourning beyond, you know, grieving. Our grief is different because when somebody passes away, we go to the wake, but there's a lot of joy. A lot of people who are trying to console the bereaved by making things light. Because it is our way of life. And they were so surprised. Oh my goodness, can you talk to us more about that? So it's just a way of bringing yourself center focus. But if you don't have that, you have nothing to give. And that's why here we will have this kind of conversation for the next couple of days. Allow me to end on a personal note about certain convictions. To the very present, I've been teaching in the humanities for the past 17 years. My college then here was called the College of Arts and Sciences. The college renamed recently the School of Arts and Sciences. I had different teachers, both in this university and in my other universities, who inspired me to join the faculty. By their passion for critical reading of the great works of literature, their commitment to critical thinking and luminous writing. By luminous, I mean not very difficult writing, but writing that is very clear, clearly understood, with simple language. So I came to Cebuano literature, like I told you, a little bit related because I had been enamored with comparing our local literature with the foreign. But by then, I also had worked hard at the local because there was so much I did not know that opened my world the moment I uncovered the treasure trove. I will ask you to name me 20 Cebuano writers. I don't know if you can do that. But probably by the end of it, don't look at your kid, that's cheating. Okay. So early Cebuano writing provided me with a chance to solidify my identity through an immersion in our own literature. I could discourse with foreign colleagues about our culture that was on par with theirs, and every time I did this, I became more and more Cebuano. I learned that when there is no question, there is no quest. I learned where no words break, there one thinks truth in his heart. That's in Psalms 15:3. I became a skeptic from the Greek skeptestai, which means to look, to consider. That was what my education equipped me for, a care for thought that this side of paradise, this side of Eden, because the Philippines is a paradise, we just don't realize it. It's our only life. To look, to consider, even as to read close is to open. What we regard as the universal plane is not the realm of eternal verities. It is our own small clearing of everlasting quest and questioning. So it is a curious thing that the word theory is from the Greek theoria, a viewing, speculation. Therefore, it's a standpoint, a way of looking. Diba? you always theorize, I think it's like this. That is already a theory. So any theory is only a way of making sense. No theory has a monopoly of answers. So every theory has a certain lifespan. That is how I read our literary critics, theorists, and philosophers. I think then that the most crucial factor in everyone's education is the love of reading, which you will have a reading kit of. Without reading with that fine sense for language, all education ceases. All pursuit of truth, knowledge, wisdom is at default. All our efforts in teaching, whether it be in Cebuano or in English or in Filipino, are directed at enhancing and enriching our students' sense for language. The supreme human invention, like I told you earlier, as earlier noted, for without language, without imagination, we would have no memory, no history, no culture, no civilization. So, what we grasp as facts, it means to make or facere in Latin, are only what sense we make of anything we perceive. But only with words and words at a given historical language do we give form to our perceptions. So, writing is also a means of translation from the Latin transfere or translatus, which means to carry across, to convey. So to write, for those writers, for you who will be writing academic papers or presentations, what you're doing is to carry it across the river of words and the figures and the images that they evoke, the reality or truth that they apprehend. As Derrida would say, there is nothing outside the text. So this is why I put a premium on Cebuano, and in the same instance of the imagination, which is the finest intelligence. Without imagination, we would have no literature, no art, no science, no technology. So all writing is text, not text cell phone. From the Latin texere, T-E-X-E-R-E, to weave. And it is the imagination that weaves the text. The meaning of our words do not come so much from themselves, nor from their differential relations, as from our experience of reality, from lives imagined, from lives lived as imagined. So, sometimes I would like to think that we are here today to arm ourselves with what we can give our students. We have been here in Cebu for quite some time, but we have not probably dug into what we have. And so I would like to exhort everybody, to encourage everybody in a community building of teachers and scholars. We are educators, and we have to really prepare our students for the serious work of leading the nation. They might not become Duterte, they might not become big leaders, but you are all leaders here. You are all doing your job, your roles, very important roles, albeit, as we would all agree, sometimes underpaid teachers. But, you know, at the end of the day, what joy we have comes from the satisfaction that we have prepared our classrooms for world-class education. That is the only beautiful consolation that we have. Never mind the money can come later. Never mind that it will all come. And it's because we dream of a beautiful future for not only our children, but for the future generation. So sometimes we are at the verge of language and literature and education. We are pushing our thinking, writing, speaking to the edge of expression and attempting to find another way of weaving our text, our Cebuano text, into the discussion. This is our sign and our signature. we are educators. So the quest and the questioning is unending. I hope that your questions will find answers in our discussion, and I hope that it will create more questions that all of us will attempt to answer in the future. Before I forget, actually we do not forget, I would like to thank the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. We have our representative, Mr. Timothy Jared Pasco from the NCCA. This is a cultural office that helps in the work of advancing and promoting the culture and the arts. I belong to the Committee on Literary Arts, and this activity is made possible because of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. Later, when we have a break, I will talk to you about the grant program because there is still time for you to apply should you be interested in doing more work in culture and the arts. So without further ado, I would leave you to the able hands of our educators. You will be with, we will be with each other, and please, if you have, like suggestions, questions, please bring them to the table because we would like this to be really a good conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor, for that thought-provoking message. So I think we all would agree that we all started reading and studying foreign books, and that before we came to studying our local literature. So it's very timely that you are here, and that means that you believe in the importance of our own literature, language, and culture. So without further ado, for our first speaker, she is currently the manager for research and publications for culture and heritage of the Ramon Avoites Foundation Incorporated in Cebu City, where she has lived all her life. Her poetry, short stories, and creative nonfiction have been anthologized in local and national publications, while some of her plays have been locally staged. She was fellow for the Faigao, Iligan, IAS, UP Visayas Creative Writing Workshops, and Faigao Drama and Performance Workshop. She has taught literature and creative writing, humanities, and communication in college and senior high school in some universities of Cebu. Without further ado, please help me welcome Ms. Heidi Emmy Palapar. Around the applause.
Okay. I'm tasked to give you an idea about pre-colonial Cebuano literature. And I find this very interesting because there's, although there are already studies about the pre-colonial period, there's so many things that are not yet known. And that is why, I think you see the illustration there. Do you know what that is? Anybody? Of course, it is the balangay. It seems like now it has become the most popular symbol for pre-colonial literature. And you know that because the first part, by the way, of the seminar, of this seminar, my seminar, is that I'm going to be giving you an idea about the pre-colonial period. I don't claim to know everything, so if you have questions, just ask them because I know I can get help from some of our speakers here who are also historians. So just ask, okay? Just feel free to ask. Anyway, let's get this on. Pre-colonial Cebu. Let's talk about pre-colonial Cebu. The sources are records written upon Spanish contact. Actually, the source that I'm using is, it has been the source for probably most researchers when they talk about or when they research about pre-colonial Cebu, because this source already condenses or puts together all the sources there is known of, that gives you an idea about pre-colonial Cebu. And that is William Henry Scott's Barangay. Are you familiar with the book? Well, I wrote the book. But anyway, I have a picture there of the book. But this is the book, because you know we're also going to be talking about sources. So I think you should get a copy of this one. Okay? Alright. When we had our, because I belong to a foundation, I work for a foundation here in Cebu, and we organized the Gabi's Kabilin. Have you heard of that? And this year's Gabi's Kabilin actually focuses on the pre-colonial Cebu. No? So William Henry Scott's resource was very helpful. Okay, now let's begin. Barangay or balangay, the boat you have seen in the previous slide, actually refers to the boat. No? So, but it is also the smallest, or refers to the smallest political unit of society. I think we know that. We have been taught that. Each community is distinct from all others and legitimized by a datus claim to personal allegiance. I think that's about how many families? 15 to 20, right, Dale? 15 to 20 families, and then they have a datu. Okay? But the datu can also make, how do you call this, alliances with other barangays, with the datu of other barangays, and that actually strengthens their, how do you call this, first and foremost, I think it's a good defense, no? Especially when they're raided, so they can get help from the other barangays. So that's very important. Datus often join their barangays in common communities, reckoning precedence and making alliances themselves. In fact, it's like a small feudal system. You're familiar? There's actually someone higher, and then there are people, or there are datus under that big sultan. We call it the sultan. So that's how it was before. And they lived on the seacoast or banks of navigable lakes and streams. You know? Contrary to what we thought, waters actually do not part us or do not separate us. Waters connect us, which is, I think, something that this kind of mindset we should bring back. Because for us now, it's so difficult because you have to traverse the ocean or the sea. That's how we think now. But actually before, no. They use the waters. And I think this is a good way to think about water, because it also gives them, how do you call it, makes them feel that water is valuable, actually. So that's how important water was for them. So their means of transportation were the boats, of course. Okay? Unless, of course, bulangoy. So, in this, how do you call this? I remember that, it's just something that I remember, because I work for Rafi, and it's in the Parian area. They used to say that, the kanal karon nga dapit sa Gaisan Main, that used to be a very big river, and that's connected to the sea. And that people would come in, with their smaller boats, and would trade. Just imagine that. But now, if you look at it, agi-agian na nimo, itong na kay stanan, unya, kanang maho, ngayon kamay nag-trade siya. So it's actually, if you think about it, we are the ones actually who made ourselves become, although the land becomes bigger, but in a sense we are also, doing something harmful to the water. We're also, in a sense, making things smaller because there's the problem of overpopulation, no more land mass, etc. So that's how it was. Anyway, so there were 3 social classes, and you know this. The datus, they were like knights, and the timawa, or the ordinary citizens, and then the uripon, or the slaves. Okay? And of course, I think you know that when you're slaves, you don't have any right, and you get to be traded, you get to be sold, and you get to be bought. Oops. Now, who were the Cebuanos? This was the description. They were medium of stature. They had black hair. That would be weird if someone has blonde hair. And dark skin. Although, those sympathetic Kulunga accounts, they call us lighter ang skin. Okay? But ingon sila, of course, compared to say for example, the Negritos or the Etas, they were really darker skin. Okay? So, ours is kayumanggi. Actually, ikuan nila giname kayumanggi. Women were generally lighter than men because of the work that they had. You know, they didn't go to the fields. They did weaving, for example, inside their houses. Okay? So women were lighter. Although, I know there were also documents that says that that say that there were also women who were darker skinned because they really, magbabad dito sa Coas. And this was how they saw beauty. No one. They had to file their teeth. You know what filing of the teeth means? Naging yung file, so that it will be even. And sometimes sa pag-file, mga buwak ang mga nipon. So, but anyway, that was how they saw beauty. And they colored it, nanas na usapon, a certain plant, para ito. And they also had gold work done to their teeth. That is why if some archaeological evidences of people before the Spanish period of our ancestors, na gold ang mga nipon. In fact, abundant kay gold before. I really wonder where the gold went. We don't have gold now. So, why did they do these things to their teeth? Because for them, only wild animals had white teeth. Okay, that separates you from the wild. You're not wild if you have black teeth. Okay, and they were tattooed. Okay, so they were called the pintados, but sa atua they called batok, no? And in a sense, the tattoos became also the principal clothing. Okay, what's interesting is that for men, I think some of you know this. Tattoos were a symbol of what? Stature of manhood. You are right, because as early as kanang puberty, the first conquest you have, and I'm not talking about conquest in terms of, appeal sa tingin ng war, no? But the conquest in terms of, say, you're having your first sexual encounter. That was, how do you call this? It is time for them also to get a tattoo. So the more tattoo, the more manly. Okay? And especially there were people who had tattoos in the face. And remember, the face is so sakit, that's very sensitive. And if you had tattoos there, that means pinaka-astig na yun ka. Okay? So, just imagine that. Now, the women have tattoos. You think? What do you think? Yes, they did. But not as much as men. Mostly, kuno sa kamot. They find it clean. Nanay tattoo sa kamot. Ang tabunan siya globes ba? Okay? Gloves. Okay. They also molded their skulls. They considered broad faces. You just imagine that broad faces with receding foreheads and flat noses, handsome. Katawang mo, because that's not anymore our standard of beauty today. So we have changed. So pagbata pa nila, humok pa man ang skull. Nanas na ipangbutang din ang paghigtan sa mga agtang sa ilang mga anak para mainana ang effect. And that is actually proven by archaeological na mga finds nga mga skulls. Okay. Visayan men wore this. Oh, definitely that's for, how do you call this, more pleasure for the woman now. And they were circumcised. Okay? Naday na shock. I heard nga naapa ni baligya yung ani kulunitus kulon. And was that goat's eye? Goat's eye. I heard of that. Anyway, they were circumcised, but they were circumcised differently. Theirs is kanang supercision daw. Meaning, sa ibabaw ra, patindog, kanang pa vertical. Ang, di ba, ang karoon ng circumcision sa kuan man, sa paraw, nalilungan mo ang foreskin, di ba? So, lahi lang. And they had pierced ears. Ang ilahang mantra, the more, the merrier. No? Ang mga babae, kuno, maabot mo pa, mga buhok sa dugan. So, I'm na-surprise kung nangbalik na nakaroon, okay, nanay-dagan doon, nag-tattoo, nagkag-earrings, because that was how it was. Uy, sa kulong penis pens. Is this the round thing? May butang sa penis. Remember, di ba na yun? Ano? Yeah. Sige. They would know.
Mustorya lang po ha. Actually, the penis pin, it's called palang or sakura. Almost every male in Cebu had it. Kini si Pigafetta, who was very, how do you call that? Very curious si Pigafetta. Nakita naman ni Pigafetta, kabot nila ni Magella sa Cebu. So, iyan ipamili ang mga sex organ sa mga lalaki. So, ang iyang nakitaan was, it's circular, para dili siya makauntang, na siya murag bolt of knot. No, so sakit din kay siya, kay insert man siya, no, sa lalaki. Unya, ang mga babae atong panahon na, mo prefer sila og mga lalaki nga naay penis pins. No, kay kanang enjoyable mo kuno kayo. So that's according to Pigafetta.
Sorry, I think that's pain, sir. Because you pin it. You pin on your the organ. Okay, so it's very interesting. There's an essay by Resin Mojares about that Visayan now. You should read that more detailed what they were. It's not just a big space, no, there's a gold side, etc. Is there? Kibaw siya ka there.
O niya, ayun, mahibulong na, anong wala naman na siya karong mga tuiga, mga panahon na, there is not an evidence of that. It's actually because mga Spanish missionaries, ila nang ipang sunog. Okay? It's actually a work of the devil. No, so pariharap mo na sa mga tapos sa una na ipangtangtangkod o murabag iisip sa mga Spanish missionaries na work of the devil.
Yeah. They weren't comfortable with the idea that it was like more, they were sexually independent. No? So they were kind of freer. Yeah. Even women, no, were allowed before marriage to engage sexually so that they know if they found the best partner, something like that. Yes, Dave. Sige na, good na dayon na.
Dili lang, ngayon ko ni Sir Tabang ako kanina. Unya, i-mention pag yung Pigafetta na women ko as young as 4 years old mag-engage ng sex. Mahibong taan na karon din, we consider that as pedophilia. But cultural man muna, sa unang panahon, legal man na para sa ila. Pero karon dili na pwede ha, so ayaw na inyong buhatan.
Ma'am said, mas complicated na ba yan ron? No, yeah. Overpopulated na. Yeah. Okay, so, can we get on? Let's forget about this part. Okay. If you really want to know about these things, I told you already one source. I said something already about pierced ears. No? Long hair. They had long hair because to cut it was a sign of mourning or punishment. So they didn't cut their hair. But, look, the contrast there, the interesting thing here is that they didn't like facial and body hair. They removed them. And they had very thin eyebrows. No? So, but the hair is something else. In fact, if you touch a woman's hair and you're not in a relationship, that was really a no-no. So, okay, Basic garments were G-string and tube skirts made of abaca, cotton, or silk. That is actually in the order of how expensive the cotton is, abaca, cotton, and silk.